Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Circle Elite Executive Roundtable, using technology to improve productivity, automate repetitive tasks, and allow consumer self-service, an Open Minds strategy series. My name is Corey Thornton. I'm the Vice President of Market Intel at Open Minds, and today I'm joined by a pair of great OM Senior Associates, Carol Duncan Clayton and Paul Duck. Before I hand it over to them, I want to quickly remind everybody that we will have a Q&A session in the latter portion of the hour. We'd love for this to be interactive. If you have any questions at any time, you can submit them using the question feature and go to webinar, and Carol and Paul will answer them. And with that, I'd like to introduce Carol and Paul.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
So today we're really going to try to cover a topic, and I think, not to put words in Carol's mouth, but I think just in terms of what we're going to try to accomplish. We tend to try to pack more in so that you're able to kind of take it home and digest it. And I think these slides will be made available to you later. But from that standpoint, what we want to do is to really provide some practical understanding of what we think is a really important topic. And Carol, I know this is certainly something that you've done some prep for. So at that, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of guide us.
Yeah, thank you. I think you did. You chose a couple of words I was thinking of. One is the pack in. I think we, really will cover a broad spectrum, but also want to keep this really practical. And I think the title of the webinar really suggests that. So I hope we give you some tips to really take back to your organization and think about not only what you're doing now to use technology to improve efficiency, but where are some paths or things that you might consider as you move forward, maybe a new idea or two. So that's our goal for today. I think you can go to the next slide. And, the background was, sort of previous, that sort of stands behind the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about, how we think about both what we are good at as human beings, but compared to what technology might bring to the table that we're not as good at, and think about how the sort of two aspects are not really competing with each other, but really we are interactive with each other in best world scenarios. We'll look at some applications to help you think about how to optimize performance within your organization. Look at some innovations. We're going to be interested in having some of your input. We have some survey questions, and so we hope you have your technology available to you, whether it's your mobile phone or through your computer while you're watching, to get your input, and so we can create not only some dialogue with you, but also build that into our session today. We will be looking at some of the I called it myths, mistakes, challenges, and fears, things that sort of maybe get in the way of our ability to move forward with technology, and then look at some Open Minds resources to really help you think through stepwise, how do you take a next step. So that's the agenda for today. I think we have about an hour. We'll leave some time for questions at the end. And let's go, Paul. I think we've got going to kick it off with a survey question, perhaps.
Yeah, so this is, like I said, it's going to be, Carol said that it's going to be interactive. So here's how you participate. We use a product called Poll Everywhere, which allows you to actually in real time participate. So if you have your computer, and you could go to pollev.com/PaulMDuck263, or you can use your mobile phone and text PaulMDuck263 to 22333 to join, and that will actually just prompt you and get you in the meeting. So we're just going to give you like a half a minute or so to kind of get logged in to Poll Everywhere, so you can participate. We've got a few polling questions that we're going to use this afternoon just to try to get an idea of some of the things that are going on with your organization and some of your thoughts and feelings about some of the topics that are our subject matter today. So again, if you go to pollev.com/PaulMDuck263, or you can text PaulMDuck263 on your mobile phone to 22333, and that will prompt you and get you in so that you can respond. So with that,
I'm feeling compelled, Paul, as people are logging in. I'm sitting here thinking, well, should I go ahead and log in? I might want to cheat. I might want to leverage the survey. But then I realize I have benefit of the microphone, so I don't need to do that.
Very true.
I'll try to be clear when I'm speaking opinion versus what I know to be in research as we go.
So let's go to the first polling question. And the first polling question is one word that describes your biggest concern about the use of technology in the various healthcare domains today. And this will create a little word cloud for us. So if you're logged in, you can still see at the top of the screen, pollev.com/PaulMDuck263. So duplication, adoption, security.
I'm seeing some great words already.
Agree. Rapid. Definitely rapid is a word, keyword. So really good.
Leaders,
Yep.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And again, if you're just joining us, we're conducting a poll right now. If you go to pollev.com/PaulMDuck263, at the very top of the screen, to participate in our poll.
Use and ease. These are all really great. We'll be hitting on some of these when we get into challenges and kind of what I would call best practice.
Yes.
And I'm thinking correctly, Paul, the word adoption is the biggest word on this because it's been said the most. Is that
That's
it's been
correct.
the most highly endorsed? Yeah.
That is correct. So you can see that we obviously have multiple people that really believe adoption's the big one, and duplication just gained some size there.
Yeah. It did. Yeah, good.
And that's actually very valid. Given redundant data entry and a lot of other things that go on, in that duplication is a time waste and can really eat away at the usefulness of technology.
I have a couple of stories about that. Yeah, and sort of mistakes to avoid.
Sure.
Well, good.
All right. That's our first poll. I think we may have got everyone who's participating. So I believe, Carol, we might have another one. No, I think those are coming up later. So I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, I think it'll come up later. Yeah, I think, just to level set for folks in terms of how you think about incorporating technology. And it gets to maybe some of the concepts on the earlier slide around duplication as well as adoption. How we are different from technology and what we really bring to the table. And I think there's a couple of clicks here, Paul. We're good at communication. We're good at doing what we're doing right here today in terms of conveying, not only verbal information, but also when you think about just human interaction, there's lots of nuance around nonverbal as well as verbal communication. We are good at interpersonal relationships, building rapport. I'm a psychologist by training, so when I go back into my early days of training, what did I learn beyond all is that warmth, empathy, and positive regard are the three things you bring to the table. It's important to have a method for your interactions, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or another type of approach, but at the core is always warmth, empathy, and positive regard. That's what is unique about humans, and that's what we bring above technology. And we'll talk some about this because as we move into telehealth service delivery, I think some of the, questions that are out is how do you create warmth, empathy, and positive regard if you're delivering not only through telehealth, which might involve a face-to-face, but what if you move into asynchronous or chatbot kind of delivery, and how does that affect your choice and selection and thinking about those? But when you compare that to technology and what technology is good at, the things that technology brings to the table that we are not as good at are things like repetitive tasks. And being able to automate repetitive tasks is, if you think about, work that becomes monotonous or boring because it's the same thing over and over, what happens is that breeds distraction, increases error for humans, as well as we're just not as fast. We just cannot create the speed that technology can create around tasks that are repetitive. and mentioned the sort of human error component to this. And of course, I come through the error, if you will, when human error in terms of data entry around electronic record or in any kind of data spreadsheet. One of my early jobs, maybe my first job out of high school, number one, was working in a chicken processing plant where I worked on the line. And you talk about repetitive tasks, of packing chicken in a box. That was something that I knew pretty quickly I didn't want to do over and over for the rest of my life. But then shortly I moved into working in the office, and at that time the auditors were in auditing the books, and my job was to check behind their manual math on a ticker tape, an adding machine. And I would run the numbers in the adding machine, and then you would square the numbers and then staple the piece of paper to that. So just imagining, that, what, 40 years ago, maybe, could be longer, have to do that math, compared to today in terms of how that manual effort and chance for error and the amount of check and balance that had to occur to make sure it was correct. I think a great value of technology in our world, and we will talk about some of this around artificial intelligence, is that within technology, the ability to look at very large data sets and recognize patterns, and the ability to use those patterns as we do in many aspects of our world, using those patterns to predict what might likely happen in the future. And when you think about that in our world of service delivery, the ability to get in front of what is likely to happen and take some preventive steps is certainly an evolution of healthcare that will create better life, better health, and longer life for all of us. So these are things that technology can bring to the table. The last one, and we see this so much, and I will continue to talk about it, is just the ability in technology to remember things. Our ability to remember many things. We will have working memory overload at some point, but that ability to use data and push things out like text reminders. We do this so much in our everyday life, and we're now able to do that within our healthcare world. These are some values that we can capitalize on to improve our efficiency, not only our efficiency, but our outcome for people. So those are just some differences. Let's look at some of the technology applications for optimizing performance, and I am interested to hearing within this audience what you're already using, the things that maybe have come out of the box for you in the recent past and sort of where your head is. This whole webinar today is really based out of the Open Minds Playbook for optimizing workforce recruitment and performance, and has really, and you can see we're on strategy 4. I think there have been a webinar for each of these strategies. But it's really been driven, even more so, the interest by the pandemic. So when we're looking at the impact on workforce, and not knowing any of your specific circumstances, but continue to hear this in almost every conversation, just workforce shortage, being not having people return to work perhaps over the course of the change with the pandemic, and then being able to recruit and retain people in certain critical positions within your organization has been really a crisis, if you will, a national crisis, and as well as on the ground level. And so the ability to just really think through how you can automate and optimize in the event, not only if you're trying to reduce your workforce, but what if you're not trying to reduce your workforce, but you just simply have vacant positions that you can't fill? How do you cover that base? So that's the sort of basis for this webinar. Let's go to the next one, and I think they will count down, and they're really in no particular order, and so I'll be interested to see how they shape up on your end. But some of the, kind of, I'm going to say, ways that are maybe most prevalent or are at the top of the sort of pile for people to think about in terms of efficiency. The first one is automated scheduling. One of the ways I notice technology in healthcare is I look at what's happening in my own personal experience or in my family and friends' experience. And one of the things I've seen early on is the ability to schedule appointments on my own, go in and make a selection for date and time. That certainly creates not only supports consumer engagement in their own care, but also creates efficiency on the provider agency side where you're not having to have someone just simply man the calendars and also man the phone call. If we go to number 9, if you look at ease and accuracy of documentation, I think this is a huge one. And in our word challenge, I saw burden and ease. The ability, and I was listening in on a webinar yesterday about, and this was, I think, being sponsored by one of our sponsors, an EHR sponsor, and just, the ability to use your technology to create ways to reduce human error so that you're not doing rework around matching your clinical note to the appropriate service code, not overbilling or underbilling, as well as creating ease for that person who's doing the note entry, whether it's your professional or your paraprofessional staff. The ability to have more time spent in direct care with consumers as opposed to taking care of the documentation needs. Revenue cycle management is another biggie in terms of just being able to bill quickly and receive return quickly. As you all know, if you're on the finance side, you don't want services delivered with a long window before that claim goes out. And you want to be able to send an automated claim so you can quickly get response back in terms of whether it was accepted, under review, or denied. And so automation of revenue cycle management is another highly efficient use of technology. More and more looking at service delivery extension through telehealth. I'm sure you all have seen the data as we have with the explosion of the use of telehealth during pandemic, and it has backed off some. We are returning more to clinic-based services, but there will continue to be, I think from your point of view, really thinking about how you can extend your access through telehealth delivery or telehealth platforms, or maybe even add to your service lines through telehealth. It is now an accepted mode of delivery and one that is really ripe for consideration. The next one is automated onboarding, and I found this really interesting. I think I was reading some articles, and I've, prior to being a consultant, I was at Relias, which is a huge, online training solution, and many organizations use them for onboarding. But the concept was being able to quickly not only have the person get trained so that they can do their work, but also automating the information around their credential tied to a contract, so that not only can they get in the field doing work, but you've got them connected to your payer so that you can also bill without having denials on the front end, and squeezing that orientation and onboarding time to shorter so that you can turn that person into a productive, billable staff person, sooner than later. Consumer assessments, I think personally, again, I'm a psychologist, is a huge opportunity for you to do assessments online, a variety of assessments, be able to, certainly automate that for efficiency purposes, but more importantly, it also allows you to collect data in digital format so that you have fields of data that you can use for analysis purposes, not just narrative report, which is often hard to use if you're trying to further the use of your data for performance or for even building treatment treatment plans or clinical outreach activity. And we will talk about that one in terms of duplication here in a bit. Clinical risk analysis, again, in decision making, the ability to have automated data analytics that help point you to persons who are in need of care that you might not otherwise know about. If you are moving into value-based arrangements, if you're a CCBHC, if you're going to take on a care coordination role, it's really important that you have the ability to see into your population of members without waiting for them to come for their appointment. You need to be able to see into who needs outreach, who should you be going after, not waiting for them to come in. And technology application there, I think is critical. I don't think that a single agency can do that very well on their own. I think you're going to need some technology applications to assist you with that. Automated reporting. Any of you who are participating from the IT or reporting side know what I'm talking about. Just the ability to handle the myriad of report requests manually. Often what happens is they sit in a queue and your queue backs up to 200 requests, and your ability to automate and use data ingestion and cleansing and warehousing and dashboard type reports so that it can actually be used, is a key for your survival. Those two go together. And let's see what the last one is. Workflows. Another really important one where you have the ability to use technology to push tasks out to people in your agency, to remind them who needs to be paid attention to today, for what purpose, particularly if it's tied to a performance metric that's going to drive a reimbursement. If you need to keep people on top of who needs their diabetes screen and who's coming in this week, and to make sure that happens, being able to automate that as opposed to counting on an individual clinician or case manager going into an individual record and tracking that one by one without an overarching technology play, it will wear you down over time. So there's my top 10. I'm sure there's others, and we'll start with these and just see which one you're already. I'm interested in what three. I picked three. Maybe you're doing all of them, but what are the top three that are, kind of alive and well? I would say, you're using them within your agency.
It looks thus far that people could jump in. Again, if you've just joined the webinar, you can go to pollev.com/paulmduck263 to join, and then you'll be able to participate, or from your mobile device, you can text paulmduck263 to 22333 to participate as well. It looks like we both number 8, automated revenue cycle management and service delivery extensions through telehealth are our top picks right now for the top 3. Make sure everyone has a chance to weigh in.
We'll let it run a few more seconds. I'm finding it fascinating because this service extension through telehealth still kind of comes to the top, Paul.
Yes.
You can see that sort of impact from the pandemic, sort of validates the position that, it's still very much a part of our service delivery system, and I think will remain there.
There's no question. I mean, I think a lot of organizations had to pivot to telehealth as a new modality, if you will, where they were either using it in a very insignificant way, but it became kind of the primary mode of service delivery during the pandemic. And we've seen, to your point, that we've seen a retreat a little bit back to more face-to-face again, but still, we'll never return back to the way it was before. Because people quickly got used to this is a convenient, way to have services delivered for a certain types of disease states.
Interesting, and I'm glad to see that revenue cycle management, and maybe not surprised as well. When you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, care and feeding happens first. And so the ability to automate and make sure you're quickly bringing in the revenue to keep your organization going is a basic foundation. So what are you likely to implement? Let us know. Here we are in October. So you're either, if you're on fiscal year July 1, you're in your 22 year. It might be upcoming for you if you're on a calendar year. What's built into your budget? What do you think about building into your strategic plan in terms of automation? I'm interested in where you think you might be headed, or you know you're headed for implementation in 2022.
And again, to respond, paulev.com/paulmduck263, or again, you can text paulmduck263 to 22333. But if you could pick one, we have our same top 10. Which one are you likely to implement in 2022?
Could treat it as a wish list.
Yes.
Oh, look at that. Wow. Oh.
Like clinical risk analysis and decision making is on top right now. We'll give everyone a chance to weigh in. Still, revenue cycle management and consumer assessments are right there neck and neck, if you will, with automated scheduling now.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I see that all of these have an answer. So what it says to me is that our top 10 is, in fact, what people are actioning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So it looks like we have people that are planning to automate the scheduling either via patient portal or some other mechanism is kind of the top priority for 2022, followed by both automated revenue cycle management and automated consumer assessments, which I think are very much kind of top of mind for provider organizations today.
Mm-hmm. They are, and I think I'll be interested. I know maybe someone has time to share later, but in terms of automated scheduling, and we'll talk some about how do you determine ROI. I'll be interested in hearing about, if we have opportunity, how an agency is thinking about that in terms of a efficiency, time saving, or there's one thing for it to make it ease for the individual to sign up, right? There's consumer satisfaction and those pieces. There's another one around how does it save money or time within the organization, and then what do you do with it? And I'm interested in hearing people's stories if we have a chance to have that share at the end. We'll do a little time check, in fact, as we go. So let's keep going, because I can see we're moving into this. I was interested in talking about some innovations in healthcare that drive strategy, and it is really important as you think about your technology play that you're linking it to your overall strategy. Again, you all know this already, but anytime you try to have a tech project that's kind of out there on its own, maybe by the IT department, but it's not linked to a larger organizational strategy, it tends to not get wings. And so, I'm interested in, I think we have a poll question, Paul. Here we go.
Yeah, we do. This is another word cloud. It's, name your most important or promising strategic application of technology in healthcare. So this could take the shape of many different things within different organizations. So if you could name, by just literally typing in the word, what your most promising strategic application of technology is in healthcare. Is it assessments? Is it finance related? Is it what functions are you looking for strategic application in your automation strategy going forward? Analytics should be at the top of everyone's list, certainly, and client and engagement are other important ones. So again, this is a word cloud. Just type in the word that you want to share. Remote.
Oh, I see patient monitoring. That made my list.
Mm-hmm.
Streamlining.
Yeah, it's important. I think people are looking for ways and building innovation into their culture where everyone is kind of expected to step up regardless of position and really talk about what are some of the ways to gain efficiency. So streamlining is a really, really good word in this application here. Any others here before we move on?
Well, I find these fascinating. I think if we move on, Paul, my what I called Carol's most intriguing list, I had 3, and I think they're all represented in the word cloud. The first one, it was monitoring, and I'll give you a couple of examples. The second one was really around analytics, and I'm going to talk to you about behavioral economics theory, but really the underpinning of all of that is analytics. And then the third one was really around streamlining. These are the 3 that catch my attention, and they catch my attention again because I see them in our natural world around me, and then when I see the application in healthcare, I can relate to them and think this is really neat. When you think about patient monitoring, and I'll go on to the next slide, the thing that I see to me that's really innovative is around medication adherence. If you look at persons who have serious mental illness, the greatest contributor to rehospitalization is dropping off of taking medication. And it happens, in about half of the population, where over time, the individual stops taking their medication for a variety of reasons. But for persons with schizophrenia particularly, it's extremely debilitating. Within 30 days, at least 2/3 of those folks who stop taking their medicine, if they're not back on it, will be readmitted. And the more debilitating fact is, as you know, when there is a recurring psychosis, your return to baseline and functioning is lower. And so each time that happens, the person's return, it doesn't come back to where they started, it comes just a little bit lower. So not only is there cost of care impact around medication adherence, there is cost to livelihood for the individual. The burden is great, both in terms of quality of life and cost of care. There have been some really neat technological advances, and I think about it in terms of persons with mental illness, years ago, decades ago, would have been hospitalized or institutionalized. And so you watched the person take the medicine. You looked to see that it wasn't cheeked. Now we have people living in the community, and the ability to use technology, things that are on, the medicine cabinet. You can tell if the person has opened their cabinet, if that's where they're storing their medicine. Abilify has a new release. I don't think there's strong outcome data, or maybe it's not in the field yet, but they have a tablet now that is ingestible, and it releases and tracks. You can actually see that the person has taken the medicine, and it tells you through a monitoring system. So it allows that person to have a care coordinator outreach if they can see that the medicine is not showing a tracking. And certainly text reminders are very simple technology solutions that we use in all kinds of aspects of our lives, and it makes sense for your reminder to tell you it's time to take your medicine. And of course, the value proposition, as I said, is not only about cost of care and quality of life, but if you are moving into integrated care or doing care coordination, the first thing you should think about is what you do to wrap around people to help make sure they take their medicines. If you don't do anything else, that's a first good step, and there's some good technological advances. Same in the diabetes area, and as you all know, there's a significant overlap for persons with mental illness as well as IDD with chronic health conditions such as diabetes. Diabetes is, it's painful in terms of self-management, it's inconvenient, and there's, sort of huge cost overlap for persons who have comorbid mental illness challenges with diabetes. And there's been very significant technological advances, all the way from wearing patches that administer medication or monitor blood level, things like pressure sensor socks that help manage, blood flow, and you can click on, Paul, with these. But there's just many, many technological applications that make sense to people. These make sense to people in terms of what they're doing in other aspects of their life, particularly with wearables, because we're all, I don't know about you, but I've got on my Apple Watch. And so it's, these are things that, really are usable, doable. And so I'm very impressed with this kind of technological advance. And again, for you, if you're moving into integrated care or care coordination, the ability to manage diabetes with a mental health SUD or IDD challenge will be kind of out of the gate expectation and requirement. If we go to the next example that really is about analytics, and I call it behavioral economics theory, because if you look at research in terms of innovation in care, the biggest, strongest research is really coming out of behavioral economics science. And it's about how do people change behavior and how can you help them not only change behavior, but sustain behavior. And what that theory and research says is that if you tell people what you want them to do, and you tell them how well they are doing that using data, show it to them, that data and technology nudges their behavior. And again, I sort of go back to my Apple Watch. I check it every day. How many steps have I taken? How am I doing compared to yesterday? And all of that is driven by data and analytics. It's not just a theory. The way you do that is you have large data that says, here's what we want you to do. We want you to get a screening for your diabetes. Here, care coordinator, is how many consumers you have that have that screening. And so here's what you need to do next. You need to go get these people who haven't had a screening. So if you just take that concept, that's really what, and it's not analytics for analytics' sake. It's analytics to tell people how they're doing relative to something you want them to do and what you expect them to do differently. This is just a little slide that these were 5 agencies that were comparing themselves in terms of their ability to impact hospital admissions and ER visits. And you can see across the sites, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it was, we want you to stay under a certain number of hospital admits per person. And here's, people were in green, we're doing great compared to what was expected. People in red needed to improve themselves. And so it gives some comparator data. And I think I have another slide that was also very powerful. And you might have seen this slide before. It's the story out of Missouri with their health home population. They set an expectation that said, if you want to be a health home, this is a few years back, at least 80% of your individuals served need to have a metabolic screen. When they first started, only 12% of those people had a metabolic screen, and they used data to say, here's how you're doing each quarter, and you can monitor yourself until you hit that mark. That's what data analytics can do. Of course, I come from that background, so it always excites me, but I think it has great power, and I'm glad to see it show up on people's list of most intriguing or most promising. The last one really is about streamlining. This slide came from a presentation done earlier at Open Minds by an agency called LAD. There is a reference to it in the back of your deck if you want to go read more about it. But I think just what is happening with smart home application in the communities, particularly with IDD populations in terms of residential supports and group home supports, just the ability to apply all kinds of technology. And if you go to the next slide, where the productivity and efficiency comes in, is just the ability to really rethink how you have direct care personnel staffing, instead of having blocks of staffing by 3 shifts, to be thinking about using technology for remote monitoring and have people be able to then attend either remotely or at certain points, whether that is through direct care or through some kind of intervention specialist reallocation, perhaps of FTE to a more specialized person, particularly important in this era when we are just, and Paul, you know this number better than I do, shortage of direct care staff is in the millions, I believe, across the country. These are, just positions that have been notoriously hard to fill and retain, but even more impacted by the pandemic.
So I think we've got yet another poll question to start: myths,
Great.
mistakes, challenges, and fears. So our poll question is, what is your biggest concern relative to healthcare technology? And the choices are: it negatively affects employment, too many choices, overwhelming analytics, i.e. the fear of AI truthfulness, sustainability and short shelf life, or the cost to value. So if you can enter that into
somebody jumped out there early.
Yeah, strong opinion, I take it.
Strong opinion or unanimous opinion. We'll find out soon enough, right?
Yes. Well, it's good that we see that no one thus far feels like it negatively affects employment.
Yeah, that's great.
And the fear of AI truthfulness, I think, is an important one too. Is that that one probably we'll see dealt with in a bunch of different ways as time moves on here, and as more AI comes into play.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes, one of the nice things that we see about the usefulness of several of the technologies that you've talked about, Carol, I think it's important to recognize that the background technology is much faster than it ever has been before. In other words, we couldn't have really implemented artificial intelligence into any useful application 10 years ago. We're now, the compute power, the memory, the accessibility of data has really increased to a point where now it kind of sets the stage for being able to use artificial intelligence. And a lot of people kind of misunderstand. They see it as a replacement for people, and it's actually a supplement. In other words, it's able to coalesce data much faster than a human being could possibly recognize a lot of trending, for example. So it's good to see.
Great point. And to this response here, I think 3 and 4 are actually related. A part of the worry about short life is that, the technology needs to be upgraded, and so therefore you're not getting your return on value. You've invested in a tool that has a short life because for whatever reason it's outdated before it ever gets implemented a lot of times, and that's a part of the challenge with technology. It's constantly evolving and iterating. And then the issue of cost related to value then comes into play. I think more importantly, and you can kind of go on to the next one around cost related to value, and we'll talk about that. It's really important that you link your technology strategy to your overall strategy so that you start early on tracking, did you get the benefit from this play? And we'll talk some about how you can do that. Sometimes, at least for clinicians, there is concern about losing job. Am I going to be replaced? Is telehealth, are you going to kind of eliminate all of us clinic people and go straight to telehealth as an example? The research bears out that that's really not the case, that the estimates that are about less than 5% result in job loss in healthcare related to technology advancement. Technology is an augmentative tool, and most agencies are using that efficiency to reallocate. They're not using it to, sort of eliminate staff necessarily. It's not something most agencies are not looking to downsize unless they have to, but they are looking to create efficiency so they can reemploy or deploy funds in a different area. So I think as you think about how you can use that technology, thinking through what will you do when you see the cost savings, whether that is to reinvest in high burnout positions where you need to maybe pay a higher rate in order to retain individuals, whether you need that to use to do kind of bonus incentives, however you need to reallocate, but be thinking about that as opposed to, that you're just going to want to implement it without knowing what the upside will be for you. We talked about this before, but mistakes, thinking that a technology performance and optimization efforts owned by the IT department, are sort of, you've got to really generate, kind of engagement and integration across your department. At the end of the day, what you're wanting to do is have ease of burden for staff, and that came up in the word cloud. What kind of efficiency can you create? Because efficiency is about people's time. What are you going to do for me, right? And so how can you create something that creates efficiency, is owned and engaged with throughout the department? The thing about short shelf life, and it also came up in the word cloud, you can't just say, I'm going to go get software X and it's one and done, and here it is. As you all know, nobody's going to turn it on and use it. So it has to be a continuous quality improvement effort. A biggie, and I see this all the time, and also came up in the word cloud, is once you've implemented, you have to cut those manual processes off at some point. And so I think one of the mistakes people make is they put their automation in, but they don't stop the old way. So then people are doing double work. And I've seen that in one of my own healthcare providers does that. I'll fill out all the forms online. I don't know how many of you have done this. I fill out the forms online. I go into the office for the appointment and I get a clipboard with the same forms, and they say, will you fill these out? And it's like, okay, at some point you have to really stay on top of stopping what you're doing in order for the efficiency to work. Challenges, I think it is hard to make choices, prioritize, having maybe too much expectation too soon. We will talk about that in return on investment. You really need to look, it's a little bit like buying a hardware. Think about it as depreciation or capitalization. You got to look several years out. You do want to see a return early so people feel success, but you really need to measure that return on investment over time so that you don't have short shelf life and people just stop engaging in it. Tracking the return, the savings, having a method to do that. Those are some of the challenges. I think it's just making a decision is the first thing. Seeing it through and measuring its impact is your next thing. This is a continuous effort. It's not a one and done. And those are, I think, some of the challenges, just sustaining the effort. And as you all know, whenever you do these projects, there will be early inefficiency because you're trying to put it in. You may be working two processes, and you have to allow for some inefficiency in the beginning. The biggest fear that I named, didn't show up in the survey, is that, especially when you're doing analytics, and for those of you who named that as you're promising, early on, people will question what you're analyzing. When it comes out, people say, that's not right. That's not right. This is wrong. And so you have to be willing to work with the data. You have to be willing to understand where people's skepticism is coming in. Maybe it is wrong. You have to do revalidation. Paul, you talked about artificial intelligence, and we can go to the next slide. Guess what? The thing about it is that we are terrible at predicting anything. These are our methods, right? We use the Ouija board, we flip a coin, we're just not very good. Humans are not very good at this, but data, large data analysis is very good at it. And you can go to the next slide. An individual I worked with one time said to me, Carol, just point me in the right direction. There's so much need, we'll never get to all of it anyway. But if you have a good enough risk modeling method to point me in the right direction, it will be better than what I'm doing now. And I've always held on to that. And we do that, again, in all aspects of our lives. The weather report is not always accurate, but I do use it to think about what I'm going to wear and how I'm going to prepare myself. But then the next slide on this is just, in terms of the predictive analyses, it is about clinical decision support. It's not making the decision. It's providing data to help you within your organization, and particularly your clinical team, get better at identifying opportunities to address need, get in front of risk sooner, get better at it. It's never 100%, but it's, it's pretty darn good, and it's better than what we can do on our own as people. Open Minds does have a playbook for optimizing performance, and you'll see the reference in the back of your deck. And certainly Paul and I and others are available to assist you if you ever want to seek any consultation to help you think about your technology play relative to your strategic plan, how you make decisions as well as implement on those. But the main thing is, have a method. Don't just come up with some, whoever's got the loudest voice in the room and has the best idea, tie it to your plan. Do some analyses, whether you use Six Sigma or other kind of method to really organize yourself around making and prioritizing rank order of choice. Use a method that people can agree on, and then begin to evaluate both your processes and your technologies that can help bring you the best return. Look at your return on investment over a 3 to 5 year period. But again, don't forget a quick win. Nobody wants to wait 5 years for the return on investment. Okay, you're going to want to see something, celebrate early, but continue to look over time. And you'll see those references in the back. I did provide a couple of examples of return on investment, just so that you have them in your deck. This was an example in a company I worked for before, where they were looking to reduce the reporting team by 4 FTEs because they wanted those FTEs to move into a new department. So they did a time study of just the time sink on how much they were doing with manual reporting and the errors and the rework. And they began to work to automate the data ingestion, the data cleansing, the structuring of the data, the code to run the report. And then quarter over quarter, they were able to say, okay, we can actually take that FTE and reallocate it now. They reported it on a dashboard. So we all looked at it monthly. How many hours we celebrated? We saved, 300 hours this month. It was fascinating to watch, and was a really good example of how you can create production efficiency and monitor it. The second example was with an EHR company, and I was here. This was a webinar that was Open Minds was supporting yesterday. It was very fascinating that they did a study around ease of burden for clinicians. Looking at the time from a visit with a individual to the note entry, the amount of time a clinician spent, not just clinician but direct service provider. And really look to reduce the amount of time from visit to note so that they could do billing, as well as increase the amount of face time with individuals that were being served. This was remarkable, happened to be the EHR vendor. I thought it was a great story, and they really put in a lot of automation around, helping structure the notes so that it wasn't just free form. Being able to pull text that allowed to match the billing code, and saw some very significant reduction in the number of notes that were written weekly so that you could do quicker billing, and the amount of revenue that was generated by each staff person, and just the ease of burden for the staff. So pulled that out of that webinar yesterday and popped it in here last night because I thought it was a fascinating ROI example. So if you're not sure how to track, I think these are some good examples to follow a playbook, if you will. Hey, we've got a few minutes, Paul. I don't know if questions have come in.
Yeah, but here's some additional resources that will be part of the deck for you to consider as you're thinking about the topic and you want to drill further into it. Open Minds obviously has a very, very in-depth, detailed database of information that will help you on this journey for sure. Let's find out if Corey, if you have any questions that have come in, or any questions that you may want to ask at this point. We still have about 6 minutes left.
All right, Paul. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Paul. I do have some questions for you.
Great.
Top of the list is, with the increase in usage of home automation, do you see any privacy issues that our attendees should be worried about?
Well, I think, certainly I think healthcare data and people's privacy are top of mind. We've seen so many things in the news media just related to hackers and people taking servers hostage, people holding organizations' data hostage for big dollars. All of those are fear based. And the reality is that the technology itself is becoming more sophisticated around security. Obviously, these vendors of these software products are taking quick action, but there are also a lot of things that have to go on within the enterprise itself that really protect people's data. And I think, to Carol's point that she made earlier, I mean, all of us have this Apple Watch or some other Fitbit or whatever the case may be. And I think it's important that we recognize who we're sharing that data with. And I think the vendors over time will become much more sensitive to what gets shared and how it gets shared. And we will see, I think, more and more of that. Carol, you have any thoughts?
Well, no, it's a great question. I was going to say, I think go out to that link about the LAD presentation, because they may have spoken to that and I just didn't pull it over. I think it's a real concern. When I talk to IT people, their focus on security is always sort of top of the line. High-tech credential is something that helps protect you as an agency. If you're not at a high-tech level, it's something to look into. It's a lift, but maybe helps. We also have a provider organization presenting at our upcoming event in Las Vegas at the end of the month. If that's not on your radar, I encourage you to take a look at that. But this organization is YAI, and they are a large, comprehensive, largely IDD consumer population, but they're doing a lot with smart home. And so if you are attending that event or can attend that event or even get in virtually, that would be I'd like to hear them speak to that. And Paul, I'll make sure I ask that question of them, because I know they've gotten very smart home enabled also, and see how they're thinking about that from an organization standpoint. But those would be two, I think, good references.
Great. Corey, any others that we want to try to take on? We only have 3 minutes left, or feel free to sign us off, whichever suits you.
Well, we are rapidly approaching 2 minutes left, and the questions I have are a little bit more robust. So if you would, could you go to your last slide there? Next one. And the next one. I guess I got my slide count wrong. There we go.
Yes.
There it is.
All right, so everybody, we are here every Thursday at 1 o'clock, and next week we'll be back with how to drive traffic and measure growth that matters in Open Minds website best practice how-to. Laird Sapir and Nicole Garris is going to lead that conversation. They're both really great. This is actually the second one. We did this early in the year, and it's part of I believe, a 3-pack. And as elite members, you have access to it. And I actually, Paul, if you could give me control of the screen for a second.
I would be happy to.
I believe I can just take it. Do it that way.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, not that one.
You're on your.
Can you see? Yep. Can you see my screen?
We're seeing something. Looks like you have several things open. There you go. Now I'm seeing Open Minds TAI. Yep.
All right. Well, Carol, you talked about the Technology and Analytics Institute is coming up at the end of the month. As elite members, everybody on this call has access to this. You can go to our front page of the Open Minds website, and we just put this brand new banner up. And if you click through that banner, it'll give you a rundown of our program for this year, as well as a chance to register. If you would, contact us at openminds@openminds.com. We have an elite code for you, which will waive any costs to attend the session. So I would like to ask everybody to attend that if possible.
Good. And the one that I mentioned is on the first day. So if you're interested in that smart home, it's not about smart home, but that organization is doing smart home, YAI. It's on Monday.
So please join us in Las Vegas. We'd love to have you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Come out there.
Absolutely.
I'm going.
I believe we are all going at Open Minds. So you will have Elite members will have a lot of people to talk to. If you have any
Yeah,
questions,
definitely.
again, openminds@openminds.com. Paul, Carol, thank you very much. This has been great. I want to
Yeah,
let
good
everybody know
talking
that
to
we will
you.
have the slide deck as well as the recording for today up on the website as early as tomorrow, no later than Monday.
Great. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Take
Yeah,
care.
thank you.